2015. We still don't have hoverboards, our cars are still stuck on the ground, but I am wondering if maybe I should place that bet on the Cubs winning the World Series. But mainly, the coming of a new year means it's time for another edition of TV Timeline. This is where we take a look at a show that has been repackaged and rebooted over the years with multiple incarnations to see how each compares. Last year, we saw how Superman has evolved in his multiple depictions on the small screen. This year, let's take a look at another superhuman being whose origins are a bit more recent by comparison.
And the Masters of the Universe.
I have to admit, as a kid, I was never a big viewer of He-Man, but looking back, it's not surprising to see why it was a big hit. The show combines sword and sorcery action in a world of futuristic technology. This is a nerd's fantasy world! Like many heroes and characters made around the 80s, He-Man was originally created by a toy company, Mattel in this case, and was first depicted in a series of mini-comics before turning to filmation to produce an animated series that debuted in syndication in 1983. That series remains among the most well-known in animation history, but the show has itself gone through both continuations and reboots over the years. And so, we're going to take a look at the multiple incarnations of the most powerful man in the universe. So let's get started with the original Filmation's He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. So if you don't know the story of He-Man, well, you clearly haven't even watched the intro to the show, which is infamous for telling you every single thing. The Cliff Notes version, the show focuses on Prince Adam of Eternia, who has the ability to use the powers of a magic sword to give himself superhuman abilities, along with that of his cowardly green tiger Cringer, who becomes Battle Cat, which he uses to protect the kingdom and the mysterious castle Grayskull from an evil anthropomorphic skeleton wizard named Skeletor. Okay, that doesn't exactly explain everything. We never do hear of where Adam came about this sword and how he discovered its ability to turn him into a combination of Prince Valiant and Conan the Barbarian. Forget finding an actual pilot episode, and in fact, figuring out an actual episode order is kind of a wasteful venture as well. Remember my constant bitching in the Ninja Turtles retrospective about how the official episode list had episodes out of order from when they actually first aired? Well, it's kind of the same here. The official first episode, according at least to the Wikipedia list, was The Cosmic Comet, which is what was always the first episode in the reruns I do remember watching in my later years. But even that Wikipedia list states that the episode actually aired 3 weeks after the one that actually aired first, the Diamond Ray of Disappearance. And in fact, if you look at that episode list, the numbered order of the episodes and their actual original air dates are completely all over the place. I guess you can get away with that when you write episodes with no form of continuity whatsoever, figuring that you can just make the opening title sequence one big exposition dump, and then we won't have to go to the trouble of writing an origin story episode. If I would have to guess, I would say that the Diamond Ray of Disappearance is the first episode, as it does seem to set things up with brief exposition on details not mentioned in the intro, specifically beginning by introducing Skeletor's cronies, Merman, Evil Lyn, Triclops, and Trapjaw. Once Skeletor informs them of his latest foolproof plan to stop the Defender of Grayskull, which I think even for this episode would be foolproof plan number 178, we are brought to Castle Eternia, where we are introduced to... no, you're really gonna start by having this guy talk first? Yeah, this is Orko, and I'll get back to him. Fortunately, he doesn't get the chance to level the whole castle because Trapjaw arrives to try and do it. And it's here that we see the standard practice of Prince Adam ducking away at the slightest sign of danger as his strategy. He basically just employs the same tactics of Clark Kent and Don Diego. Be so cowardly and incompetent in your civilian persona that no one would suspect who you really are. And while they did try to make subtle changes to the character upon transformation, like giving him slightly darker skin and a deeper voice, along with making Battle Cat bigger than his cowardly counterpart and giving him armor, yeah, this show has also been the butt of a lot of jokes from people who don't understand how anyone could see how closely Adam and He-Man resemble each other to make the connection. I mean, but what could you expect? This was made by Filmation, which I think operated with about half the budget of Hanna-Barbera. And to me, that isn't even the most inexplicable element of the story scenario. That would be why, while Orko and the King's chief engineer Man-at-Arms know of Adam's secret, Man-at-Arms' adopted daughter Teela does not. Yeah, it would make sense that he wouldn't want his daughter to possibly be at risk of knowing this information, except that she's the captain of the King's Guard! In fact, it's revealed in episode 2 that Teela's actual mother is the Sorceress, the ruler of Castle Grayskull, and the only other person who knows He-Man's secret. But no, it's just made that she isn't aware in order to have that same Lois and Clark situation of Adam always getting on Teela's nerves while she drools for his secret counterpart. It's too bad because in most episodes, Teela is shown to be a very competent fighter and well-deserving of her rank. And she's not the only example of women being shown as strong characters in this series. In fact, it's revealed that not only is Adam's mother originally from Earth, she was an astronaut who was forced to crash land on this planet before eventually marrying the king. Yeah, it's amazing how you never hear the feminists say this, but it was the 1980s where women started becoming strong, powerful characters in cartoons. About time that decade started getting its due. There really isn't all that much else to say about the series, since the episodes are all pretty much interchangeable. They usually involve Adam helping out the King's soldiers, like Man-at-Arms or Ram Man, and or traveling to some new location on Eternia in order to thwart the latest plan by Skeletor and his minions. The one thing I will say that is impressive is there isn't really a whole technology versus sorcery angle like in other shows, because both sides are seen using both with no real disdain toward either or. Which is really amazing because mixing science and magic is not an easy task whatsoever.
You mean like that time you tried to get Genie help us build that transportation ray?
We promise we never talk about that again! God, the stink of Dimension X creatures takes forever to get out. The show basically sold itself not on any deep storylines, but the colorful characters that made up this universe, and quite a few episodes did center around one character each. Though they never really went into too much depth of those characters. I mean, we did get that little detail about Teela and her mother, and in the second season, we learned about how Adam found Cringer and eventually gave him the power of Battle Cat. And then there's, yeah, Orko. A guy who looks like he came from the Final Fantasy universe, but was kicked out for failing the Black Mage entry exam. Look, to be honest, I can't really find myself disliking him as much as some other bumbling sidekick characters. Yeah, he's a screw-up, but you can tell he means well, and there were actually some good episodes that gave him some decent character development. And heck, he definitely came off as more competent than his uncle. Besides, at least they didn't think to create a spin-off show centered around just him. But then again, what type of morons would want to create a show starring a comic relief character? The moron's running Nickelodeon, apparently. Another guy who I think gets a bad rap is Skeletor, who, like the Shredder from the first Ninja Turtle series, is nowadays looked on as an incompetent villain, mainly from just the time period he was created. The truth is, he could really be quite cunning at times, and came up with some insidious plots, like taking control of a renegade comet to rain destruction down on Eternia. Most of the time his plans were thwarted simply because He-Man refused to give up and give in, or particularly his minions, especially Beast-Man, screwing up in the end. But come on, try to name many cartoon series where the evil lackeys aren't incompetent bunglers. I mean, let's face it, when you're enlisting members of your League of Doom, your choices are usually limited to guys with more guts than brains, or people smart enough that they're planning to stab you in the back eventually. When you're an evil mastermind, good help really is hard to find. Of course, I can't talk about the original He-Man without bringing up its spin-off. It started with The Secret of the Sword, which was one of multiple movies based off of a cartoon show to get a theatrical release in the mid-80s. In it, He-Man travels to the world of Etheria, and long story short, discovers he has a twin sister named Adora, who winds up getting a sword of her own and becoming She-Ra, Princess of Power, which led to her getting her own series, which actually premiered less than a year after the last episode of He-Man originally aired. And while the show did have some variances, most notably that She-Ra was on the side of the insurgents in her world, rebelling against an evil ruler, while He-Man protects his peaceful king from evil insurgents, yeah, it pretty much is the same story with just different characters. But it's a story that worked on both levels, and one that resulted in the original He-Man enduring far longer than just the 2 seasons the original episodes aired. It has some of the standard tropes of many 80s cartoons that online critics today love to ridicule: little to no continuity, villains that don't often come as the sharpest in the box, and a lot of other characters supposedly not getting what should be right in front of their faces, but it clearly was not meant to be a show taken that seriously. It was just meant to be colorful, cheesy, action-packed, and fun. And it did have a lot of people on its production staff that would become pretty big names in the industry. The writing staff included Paul Dini and Tom Rugger, who would both write several of the Warner cartoons in the 90s, along with future Ninja Turtles writers David Wise and Michael Reeves. And this was another 80s cartoon where the music was made by future Power Rangers creators Haim Saban and Shuki Levy. Overall, it was one of the first examples that cartoons and other kids' programming could be successful in the fledgling medium of afternoon syndication, which was growing fast at the time, with more television networks and stations forming on the UHF bandwidth. The show itself remains widely distributed to this day via DVD and Hulu, along with reruns airing on one network after another, the most recent being on the Retro Television Network. He-Man was such a popular and nostalgic piece that naturally someone would think of the idea of trying to continue the story told. And amazingly, it was only a few years later that, despite its original production company going under, that fans were excited to hear that the story of He-Man would in fact continue. What did they get? Oh boy, we'll get into that after this. In 1989, Filmation ceased operations, but Mattel clearly still had dreams of reviving He-Man as a marketable character. And around the same time, they turned to Jean Chalopin, the founder and longtime executive producer of DiC. Yeah, how many of you knew that one of the biggest producers of American kids cartoons in the 1980s was originally a French company? But by the late 80s, Chalopin had sold off Deke to his American partner Andy Hayward to move on to his own endeavors, and this led to him agreeing to produce a new He-Man series under his new Para-France studio. A handful of the original production members from the first series were brought back, in particular recruiting Saban and Levy to once again compose the music. Unfortunately, those were about the only names from the original series that would return, and what was the end result? Well, let's just look and see as we get into the new adventures of He-Man.
My name is Adam of Grayskull. When good is threatened by the power of Eternia,
We're screwed.
The first episode opens on Planet Druidia? So the show opens not on Eternia, but instead on the planet Primus, which appears to be at war with a group of galactic mutants. So this is a future where Magneto's forces won? I should call it a pseudo-war, because only the mutants are wanting to fight, while the galactic guardians of Primus encase the entire planet in a bubble that the mutants can't get past. As a result, all of the soldiers on Primus sit around playing simulation games, while a lot of the civilians have become lazy and content and just look at the mutants' constant attempts to break the shield as a nuisance.
You don't have to fight, Kaz. The shield protects us. We have nothing to fear. The mutants are attacking again! Don't worry, it'll be over soon.
But Master Cebrian knows that the shield is weakening and soon the mutants will break through. However, he declares that a great event is coming that will allow them to travel back in time to find
power of the good and the way of the magic. We have the means to bring it to Primus.
Yeah, they're gonna say that a lot in this series. And no, it's not as annoying as hearing the power of Grayskull all the time. It's far more annoying! Cebrius has enlisted the aid of the scientists of Primus toward his goal, and let's just say that after 10 seconds with these guys, you'll never complain about Orko again.
It gives me great pleasure to present the time vessel, invented by myself.
You built a time machine, and it looks like a freaking snail. Emmett Brown, the Doctor, and even Calvin and Hobbes are laughing at your ineptitude.
Just 2 mords ago, they were begging me, please, oh, please, Gebel, you've got to help us with the time vessel. You're the only one who can invent it, Gebel. Now, of course, they're trying to take all the credit!
The soldiers Flipshot and Hydran are sent back to the past, where they are immediately taken prisoner by the minions of Skeletor, and wow! I mean, wow! You actually found a way to make Skeletor even goofier than before! It's like Dr. Draken tried to get plastic surgery and went with the lowest bidder! This is what the new animators felt would pass for menacing. Maybe nightmare-inducing, sure, but definitely not menacing. And you gotta love his reaction to discovering there's a place of advanced technology but no weapons. Like even he is marveling at such a ridiculous concept. Really is bad writing when you can be mocked that easily by the villain.
A people who can build travel through time, yet are unable to defend themselves. I like that. You have to understand, we get a lot of bad people around here who pretend to be good. But I can tell you boys are good, just like me.
Somehow I didn't think good would look like this.
Yes, they're going to trust the guy who looks like the Joker if he was malnourished. We now cut to He-Man as Prince Adam, who now dresses like he's at a toga party, telling his parents that he has been chosen to save the future, and then he changes into He-Man right in front of them. So yeah, he now just all of a sudden reveals his secret to the people he's been keeping it from for years. About the only way they could have more blatantly said we're not going to see them or Eternia again is if they were killed off. And then he just up and leaves without saying goodbye to Teela, Man-at-Arms, Orko, or even Cringer. Wow, writers, could you say we don't give a freaking flip about the supporting cast of the original series even more blatantly? And yes, it's more or less hinted that Eternia and Primus are actually one and the same. So what the hell happened in all these years that apparently one race of people completely died out and was replaced by a whole new race that gave the planet a whole new identity? How is it that this series has an actual pilot and yet is making me ask more questions than the first series did?
They're both powerful. But which is the good? The time hole. It's beginning to close. We'll take them both.
One has the chance to save us all, and the other is likely to doom us all. I don't see any harm in both of them coming to our world. Sure enough, as soon as they arrive back in the future, the mutants have succeeded in breaking the shield, a battle wages, and Skeletor immediately falls in with the mutants and their leader Flog.
I'll help you if you help me. Teach me the ways of this galaxy, and I'll teach you how to defeat He-Man.
Because I have such a good track record against him.
Okay, we'll try it. But just remember who's in charge.
Dude, you'd have been better off allying yourself with Starscream.
You are the one I sent for. You have the power of the good in the way of the magic.
So I'm guessing you can see some of the basic issues with this series. It's similar to Ninja Turtles' Next Mutation in that the creators have thrown in a more recognized name into their own show with their own characters. And yes, most of those characters are as annoying as frack. Let's start with the fact that almost all of them are complete invalids when it comes to fighting. For most of the first episode or two, they just stand around and let He-Man do all the work. It's really bad when you make the soldiers of Eternia look like General MacArthur's forces by comparison, especially when they had a guy where all he did was headbutt people. I could see this as maybe trying to show an example of the strong needing to protect the weak, but it doesn't make it that easy to watch when the weak come off as not fighting because they don't want to rather than they can't. Heck, it turns out they had a freaking starship stored that was made by a previous generation, and they never got around to trying to get it to work until now that He-Man is here.
The shield protected us so well for so long that weapons like this were outlawed.
At least I can buy the fact that all this technology was made by a previous generation. It sure as hell couldn't have been made by these guys who can't go 5 minutes without getting into a pissing contest.
I'm cold, if you don't mind. I didn't want that much cold, you are. Murdoch, you're sleeping. We're working and you're sleeping.
I was working while I was sleeping. Or was I sleeping while I was working? Or was I?
Oh, stop it! Stop it!
My sentiments exactly. It's almost a toss-up as to what's more annoying to watch, the constant bickering going on between the scientists, or this little pissant of a girl constantly trying to tell her brother that he has no business being a fighter. I mean, how did we go so freaking backwards in how the women are portrayed in He-Man? We went from Teela and She-Ra to the long-lost daughter of the Princess of Oriana spouting out idealistic bullcrap. Hey, little girly girl, the mutants have already broken through. I think learning how to fight back might just be a good idea.
Drissy, do you think it's true there are are holes in the shield? Oh, those are rumors, Kaz. The scientists, Master Sebrian, and the Inner Council have always protected us.
Seriously, she makes me want to see Naya Sanchez smack her upside the head with her black belt. The only way these people actually have a chance is because Flog is an even bigger idiot, because he has no damn backbone and constantly defers to Skeletor.
Are we taking orders from him or you?
Flog, king of the Tri-Solar Galaxy?
We'll try it Skeletor's way.
Could there be a wiser mutant in the universe?
Heck, the whole thing is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. I severely doubt that He-Man alone would be able to save an entire world of incompetents and pacifists that can't defend themselves at all. Since, you know, even with his super abilities, he was still one of an entire fighting force defending Eternia. Flog still probably would have wiped Primus clean if not for Skeletor playing Wormtongue talking in his ear. Yes, Skeletor was pretty much a cookie-cutter villain from the 80s, always coming up with grand master plans that were undone by either his own incompetent minions or his ego, but at least he was trying. Flog comes off as so mealy-mouthed that you have to wonder why Skeletor doesn't just squash him and take over the whole operation himself. He kept a whole bunch of monsters from different lands and worlds in line for the most part. You can't tell me he couldn't force the other mutants to follow him. Heck, they might have ended up respecting him more than Flog for him actually having more ambition. But no, he just keeps flattering Flog to his face while dreaming of sticking the knife in his back. Actually, now that I think about it more, it's kind of Ninja Turtles' next mutation in reverse. They stuck the two main characters from the old series in a completely different scenario with all new characters, but here they were determined to make sure the old ones were still the focus. A noble effort for sure, but when you have so many new characters and make almost all of them so grossly inferior to their predecessors in order to make those still around look good, it does nothing but make you wonder why both He-Man and Skeletor don't end up joining forces in the end just to get out of this mess. This Flog and his minions are the worst bunglers I've ever seen! I never thought I'd find myself missing the likes of Beastman! And these people of Primus are practically unbearable! Tell you what, He-Man, you get your hands on that starship, I'll use my magic and the mutants' technology, and we can get a new time machine together that will allow us to go home! Yes, perhaps we can ultimately change history so a future like this never ends up happening. The episodes after that, well, it looks like they have a story arc, like how the next ones after the first are about He-Man needing to help restore the planet's temperature regulator. Yeah, apparently these people caused global warming and need a big machine to keep the air cool enough to live in. The series did appear to end on an actual resolution where He-Man got the Guardians and mutants to live in peace, but I doubt much of anyone was still watching by that time to care. Trust me when I can say flat out that New Adventures of He-Man does not have the power. Watching this thing, you get the sense that they wanted to make an epic drama series, but it gets totally derailed by irritating characters and plot elements that require the idiot ball for them to occur, and I mean more than in the original. In other words, they took the worst parts of the corny action cartoons of the 80s and not only exaggerated them, but put them ahead of the good traits that made the characters and stories endearing and enjoyable. New Adventures was to He-Man what Batman and Robin was to the first movies based on the Caped Crusader. It completely killed the franchise and left it buried for several years. The good news is, though, that eventually things can rise from those ashes, and we'll show you what rose from the ashes after this. By the turn of the century, Mattel was once again looking to revive He-Man with a new series that would ultimately air on Cartoon Network's Toonami. This time, animation was handed over to Mike Young Productions, and the creator of the first series, Michael Halperin, was brought back to develop this new series. Halperin proceeded to enlist numerous writers that had been with the first show, in particular Michael Reeves and Larry DiTilio, which laid the foundation for the original series to be the basis for this new creation. So let's see what they came up with as we get into the 2002 version of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
I am Adam, Prince of Eternia, defender of the secrets of Castle Grayskull. This is Cringer, my fearless friend. Fabulous. By the power of Grayskull!
I have the power!
You're not going to exposit everything in the title sequence? Then how the hell are we gonna know what's going on? Oh, so this series is actually going to have a pilot episode. It starts on Eternia, where I think these guys got lost on their way to MagFest. No, this is Captain Randor, who approaches what is known as the Great Council.
If Keldor's forces breach the Hall of Wisdom, you will be vanquished and all the power of Eternia will be his.
Your forces will defeat him.
And you, Randor, as king, shall rule Eternia in our place.
King? I'm merely a soldier.
Battle now, great prophecy later. Randor must fight the forces of Keldor, who is apparently a renegade from the planet Pandora. I got a feeling that ain't gonna wash out easily.
Peace will come to Eternia, but only for a time.
And then?
A hero shall emerge to protect Eternia.
So the council just bailed at the biggest sign of trouble and left Randor to clean up the mess and take care of the whole kingdom in their place. Yeah, they're kinda dicks. We fast forward years later where we meet this version of Prince Adam, partaking in what must amount to flirting with Teela.
New ride.
Should the forces of evil attack...
What forces of evil? My father and the Defenders drove them away years ago.
Okay, let's get this out of the way. No, this is nowhere near as annoying as Drizzy from New Adventures. Drizzy was arrogant that her world was safe as the mutants were constantly trying to break through. Adam has more reason to be cocky because there hasn't been a threat to Eternia in years. And as we'll see, that attitude of his will change. As Adam has his birthday party, Teela is being Teela, and Orko is being, well, Orko.
She'll make a great princess.
Damsel in distress, I am not.
Ah! Uh-oh. Wrong spell.
Across the other side of the Rainbow Wall, the Legion of Doom Eternia chapter is assembling at Snake Mountain as this mysterious figure says he has found a way to break through to the other lands. For some reason, it's Man-at-Arms and not the King who receives a strange voice that tells them to bring Adam to Castle Grayskull, where the sorceress tells them that the prophecy is now to come to fruition.
You are that hero, Prince Adam. You shall be transformed into a great warrior.
Naturally, Adam is more than a little skeptical at all this, but things will soon force him to see differently.
All you will taste is the bitterness of defeat, Keldor.
I think not. And the name is Skeletor.
By the the way, Cringer doesn't speak in this series, and I'm not sure what seems goofier. A tiger who talks like the dog from those Bible claymation cartoons, or one that meows like a kitten. So the sorceress leads Adam through Grayskull in a scene that I'm pretty sure I saw happen in Ocarina of Time. And now we're in some kind of Final Fantasy world, where it's finally revealed that the Elders have been hiding their power in Grayskull for all these years, and are now ready to bestow them to one such individual.
By the power of Grayskull!
You know, am I gonna have to say that every time? Because that could get kind of monotonous and silly after a while.
You will need a loyal companion.
Yeah, pretty slim pickings, but beggars can't be choosers. And yes, if you didn't notice it by now, our title character here is voiced by Cam Clark, which means for Adam, we get Mario from Denver the Last Dinosaur, and for He-Man, we get Leonardo from the original Ninja Turtles. Long story short, to finish off the pilot, He-Man is able to rally the King's forces and draw back Skeletors, but he has to make the big damn hero choice of letting Skeletor go in order to save his father. Now, the interesting thing about this series is even though Adam has now become He-Man, it's still clear that he has troubles in dealing with his new identity. For example, he's not as comfortable with the idea of being perceived as a wimp in his civilian persona, as shown in the first episode after the pilot, where he becomes obsessed with proving himself as Adam, which leads to him getting captured. Oh, and it's also here that we take care of a little detail as to why Skeletor wouldn't suspect Adam of being He-Man.
This doesn't even belong to He-Man. It's a boy's garment bearing the royal crest. No doubt belonging to Randor's son, that callow Prince Alan.
It's actually reminiscent of John Byrne's second issue of Superman after Crisis on Infinite Earths, where Luthor's supercomputer deduces Superman is Clark Kent, and he just won't believe it. See, sometimes it's just flat-out arrogance and not complete stupidity that causes you to miss what could be right in front of your faces. It's a very fine line. For what it's worth, they did make some more cosmetic changes to the characters in this series, like making sure Adam actually becomes more buff with a slightly different hairstyle when he becomes He-Man, in addition to his deeper voice, all of which was what the creators of the original series wanted to do. It really is amazing what additional details animators can do when they're given something like, you know, a budget. That isn't to say they didn't create some other plot holes in regards to He-Man's secret. For example, when Skeletor does capture Adam, he sends his parents proof in the form of Adam's sword. You know, the sword that looks a lot like the one He-Man uses. Then there's the fact that Skeletor always keeps tabs on Castle Eternia through these flying cameras called Doom Seekers, and yet not once do they ever pick up on Adam talking about being He-Man at all? Maybe we should at least keep tabs on this Prince Adam character. Oh, whoops, he always has the Do Not Disturb sign on his door, can't do it. But those details were made up for with a lot of extra depth given to the characters. For example, a lot of them get their backstories explained in various episodes, including Orko, and even Skeletor's minions, which we'll get to later. The finale to the first season, which was essentially a three-parter that crossed over into the next one, was one of the more impressive stories I've seen. Skeletor actually lets his minions get caught by the Masters in order for them to let their guard down, causing all the Masters to get captured and forcing Adam to have to defend Grayskull as himself after he loses his sword. But yeah, he's still Skeletor in some regards.
I've decided to allow you to live just long enough to bear witness to my greatest achievement. The conquest of Castle Grayskull and the ultimate power that lies within!
Yeah, that comes back to bite him in the bony ass.
But I got something you're gonna really, really like. Ta-da!
The second season really goes into the history of Eternia, where we not only learn where the power of He-Man and the sword came from, and that Skeletor's mentor was Hordak, yes, that Hordak, but also hints as to who Teela's actual father might be. And we even learn how Skeletor and Evelyn came to be allies.
I've heard of you, and I like what I've heard, but I like what I see even more.
$10 says they've boned one another.
You promised you wouldn't go there!
We also learn that Eternia was once dominated by the Snake Men, who naturally were the ones who originally built Skeletor's lair of Snake Mountain. These guys pretty much became the main villains of the second season, as Evil Lyn betrays Skeletor to help the Snake Man Cobra Khan free King Hiss and the Snake People imprisoned below Snake Mountain. I gotta admit, I had mixed feelings on the Snake Men taking over the show like that. It was definitely sad to see Skeletor flee underground when King Hiss obtains full power, not to be a factor at all in the season's final episode. But I can't really get that upset about using them as replacement villains, since they were based on characters that were created in the original mini-comics, but never made it to the first cartoon. The saddest part is we never got to see what became of Skeletor after that, because the show was not renewed for another season, which is really too bad, because there have been rumors that future plans included introducing She-Ra, and it would have been fun to see what they did with her character. But other than that, the newer season of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe? Pretty darn amazing! The creators really paid tribute to the original with not just staying true to the characters, but also with some good lighthearted comedy and dialogue to mix in with the more dramatic action. It also doesn't hurt that they went with some really good voice casting, as Brian Dobson and Gabe Kouth as Skeletor and Orko get about as close to Alan Oppenheimer and Lou Scheimer's voices as you can get. They basically took the first series and looked to answer all the questions people had regarding it. In fact, ignoring a few minor details, one could almost call this a prequel to the first series. At the very least, if New Adventures was like Ninja Turtles' Next Mutation, this was like the 2000 series of TMNT, expanding on the concept with deeper story arcs and character development. For anyone who wants to see a nostalgic show rebooted and done right, this is a must-have for any collection. Either way, it's clear through all these incarnations that this character continues to endure, and for reasons not hard to see at all. He-Man was created on simplicity, and it succeeds because of that, like a lot of the other cartoons created in the 80s that became iconic. The setting, story, and characters are all easy to understand, and thus easy to get wrapped into. It's a fantasy setting through and through, and one that many people can wish to be a part of. He-Man continues to live on in DC Comics, and rumors of a new movie have been swirling for a few years now, so it looks like there will be many more years to come where kids of all ages will believe that they can have the power of Grayskull. Meanwhile, let's hope this year can be more enjoyable to all of us. Hoverboards are no. We'll see you next time on TV Trash.